to the Adobe Creative Educator live stream show. I am so excited to be joining you today. My name is Tanya Averitt, and I will be your host for today's episode. And I have a very special guest that is joining us today live. And I'm going to just bring her in. She's a very dear friend of mine. Hello.
Hi.
So if you are joining, please feel free to tell us in the chat where you're joining from. I'd love to hear what part of the world. We have such a great audience here that is like so international. So please do, add your names, share a little bit about yourself. So I want to learn about you, even though I know you really well. So Kristen, tell us about you.
Hi, I am a Adobe education leader and master teacher, and I can't believe this, but next year will be my 15th year as a full-time classroom teacher. I started off my first eight years as a New York City public school teacher in the Bronx. And after many cold winters, shoveling myself out at 5 a.m., we packed our bags and moved to sunny South Florida, and now I teach at a private and international boarding school in South Florida in a high school setting.
So Kristen also isn't mentioning that she's one of my dearest friends, and her and I actually taught together a few years ago at another school. And I also live in South Florida, and meeting Kristen has been probably the best thing that's ever happened to me since moving here, because she's an amazing educator and one of the strongest instructional designers I've probably ever met in my entire life. So I'm super excited to have you here today. And today's episode, what we're going to be sharing is basically a social studies toolkit. So if you are a social studies teacher, humanities teacher, social science teacher, depending on where you are, what you teach, this is definitely going to be an episode for you. I would recommend, if you're not, tag somebody who is in the chat. Let them know about today's show. Share it with them, because Kristen is literally a wealth of knowledge, and she'll be sharing some amazing resources to help your teachers or yourself really rethink the way that you're looking at social studies, or give you some resources to get you started. So, Kristen, I'm gonna just kind of kick it off, and I'm gonna ask, as a K-12, it's someone who's taught K-12, social studies, what is your approach and philosophy to teaching social studies?
For social studies, what always fascinates me is that a lot of students feel, very far removed from learning about the past as something that is kind of linear and stuck and stagnant. But to me, it's something that is it's ever evolving. There's always new interpretations of historical periods, and it's getting my students to understand that these moments are created by men and women who were very similar or sometimes extremely different to us, and to teach kids how to think like historians rather than teach them what exactly to think. I also think that as we are continually growing in our ability to connect and be global citizens and have these deep and meaningful connections instantaneously throughout the world, we're also at the same time seeing greater polarization and more of this dichotomy between us and them. And you see a lot of these movements that are rising as a result of some of this conflict. So I think that as a social studies teacher, it's really important for us not to tell kids what they should be thinking, but to give them a space to grow as critical thinkers, that they're exposed to multiple perspectives, that they can learn how to suss out real from fake news and information to find what credible sources are there, and how to use them appropriately, and how to think divergently, so they can come up with innovative solutions to some of the problems that we're seeing. But ultimately, at the core, I think that for me, teaching in the social sciences is an experience in strengthening empathy and human connection by looking at human stories, by growing in our ability to collaborate and have difficult conversations with each other, to actively listen, and to get a sense of the world outside of our perspective here, but to see it for more as an interconnected place and a complex place.
I love that. I love how you framed your philosophy and your approach to as a teacher, especially a teacher who teaches a subject that in right now is highly politicized and can often be challenging, given our current political climate in so many places all over. So I think that that's so powerful, the way that you've kind of expressed that your job, you see your job as really empowering students to think for themselves, essentially. And I think that is such an important point. You know, like, besides the fact that we have had such an interesting year, as a social studies teacher, I can imagine it's been crazy. But we've also had, this has been an abnormal year in terms of just in general teaching, right? Just the fact that we've had a pandemic and we've had our students, learning in remote environments, hybrid environments. It's definitely been a year for the books. So I'm wondering, from your perspective, what have been some of the major challenges that you might have faced, and how have you overcome them, or are still overcoming them or trying to? So how have you approached this year?
Yeah, so at my school, we've been in Florida. We've been in hybrid in-person learning since August. So it's an exhausting experience for teachers, for students, and I think for me, a big challenge that I wasn't anticipating so much was things that go back to my first year of teaching, like wait time for students and speaking protocols. I've really been leaning on those a lot to get it so that I'm not the one that's doing most of the talking. I think that when I'm in 100% in-person learning, I'm really comfortable with wait time and not doing rapid fire questions. But all of a sudden, when you see yourself on a screen all the time, that silence can be unnerving and uncomfortable. And so using those speaking protocols in breakout rooms really has helped kids, I think, build this relationship and comfort level in expressing their opinions and being assertive, and feeling seen in a space where they could otherwise really be hidden. In a lot of schools, I know that they have a no camera policy where kids, you're not maybe even sure if they're there. So giving kids the space to speak and to create, I think, is really important also, because those who are actively doing in any session are the ones who are doing the learning. So if it's teacher led, I never really can be certain what my students are getting out of it. Not to mention that it's draining to be sitting on the other side of those meetings where you're just being talked at all day long. So I think of my students, I think of myself in terms of keeping up that energy level too, like finding a place like this where I can connect with people online who are going to similarly keep me excited and engaged as an educator and fill my cup, have really been lifesavers in this space too, as everyone is challenged and tired at this point too.
Oh, I can imagine this must have been, and this must still be, one of the most exhausting years for you and for so many of your colleagues and peers. And I'm a fellow teacher, right? But this year I'm not in the classroom, so I could just just hearing your stories, hearing from my friends, it definitely sounds like you're constantly approaching things like a first year teacher almost, right? And I can imagine that that's been definitely challenging. And with that in mind, I think it's really important that we really stick together as a community, right? That right now our network has never been more important, and that the spirit of educators is usually the ones that you want to be around are the ones that are collaborative, right? And so I know you've done some incredible work with the Adobe Master Teacher Program, where you've created some incredible content. I'm wondering, like, for educators who are looking for instructional resources, or social studies teachers who are looking for these instructional resources, especially around distance learning, where would you recommend that they look?
Obviously, I think one great place is the Adobe Education Exchange. Uh, uh, in addition to that, also some of the collaboration that we did with Better Lesson, I think that there's a lot of great resources there as well that are in both places. And what I think is so wonderful, especially about the Adobe Education Exchange, is that these lessons that are posted are available in Google Docs. And the teachers that contribute really do it from a place of wanting to help and to share. So if you find a way to take a Google Doc and adapt it to the needs of your classroom, rock on. That makes us so excited. We're so happy to hear that. And what I think is so great too is that the lessons that are there are based and rooted in deep pedagogy. They're very strong lessons as a whole, from experienced teachers. And I think that there's a lot of space to, even if you're looking at a lesson plan, you might think, hey, they posted this tool within Adobe Creative Cloud for the demonstration of learning, and I want them to have even more control. So I'm going to do something more advanced. And there's room to do that and to adapt these based off of what your learners need. And there's tutorials that are embedded right in there. So even if you're like, what, my students might be able to handle it, I don't know if I know how to use the tool, which sometimes you have to take that leap of faith. There's step-by-step tutorials, videos, everything there to back you up as a teacher. So I think that this is a really great place to be able to pull from and have something that's really student-facing, good to users, even too, as Tanya is pulling through. There's templates for planning for students, for doing visible thinking strategies. Everything that you would need is right there. So that's a really useful resource as well. And the people too that we worked with from Better Lesson also have tons of lessons that are available, and are just some of, when you talk about community, are just some of the most wonderful, gracious people out there who are so willing to help and support. So it's a really wonderful place to get started. In addition to, some of the strongholds for history, which would be teaching tolerance and Stanford, thinking like a historian. Those are some great places to get started.
Yes, teaching tolerance is amazing as well. And if you're not familiar with the lessons that, I just Googled it, so it's super straightforward to find, but there are amazing resources here as well, and all available for free. So this is definitely worth checking out. And you also mentioned Stanford's
Thinking Like a Historian, and also some of the lessons that are available in the in edX are from their research for civic online reasoning, which is teaching students explicit strategies for being able to vet resources to see if they're fake news versus what's a credible resource. Thinking Like a Historian walks through how to use primary source documents to have kids develop their critical thinking skills as historians. So both of these things, I as a social studies teacher, a lot of times I hear from K to 12, and I have my own children in my house. My young sons, I'm really cautious of them as well if they're ever hearing me talk about, politics or history. A lot of times children parrot what they hear at home, or they parrot what their friends are saying, or they parrot what they see on social media. And so these are really great resources that teach kids how to judge what they read and what they're hearing and learning about themselves, and the criteria that they're using or not using to make these decisions. So I think that learning is most powerful when students learn it themselves versus telling them, this is the right way to think about something and this is the wrong way to think about something, versus letting them see for themselves and uncover that piece is powerful.
Oh, wow. Yeah, this is fantastic. These are such great resources. I actually, it's the first time I really kind of dug into looking through them, and you don't have to start from scratch, which is kind of like where we're going to head to next, because you actually have chosen a couple very specific resources through the education exchange, some of which you've actually created yourself, which is super cool, that you're going to share. And I'm going to share links so that people can really see and we'll dig in a little bit deeper around the skill set and how to use these resources. So if you want to share your screen, I'll share it. And we can kind of walk through some of these lessons as well. And I'll share the links in terms of how to access them as well.
Okay. So this is one that is one of my favorites for illustrating historical thinking. So the lesson is called Progress or Patterns. And essentially what this lesson is that as a student, I always heard we need to learn about history or we're doomed to repeat it. Yet in teaching history, a lot of times we talk about continuity and change over time and the repeating of these patterns. So I wanted students to think critically about this quote and to think about why is it that we study history as a way to get them excited and engaged in this space. And students take one of the resources that they find here on, these are some places to start, and people are welcome to add whatever they want, but these are some ones to think about. But to think about Chinese immigration in the United States, indigenous population, the women's movement, and to use that as one of their examples to show whether history has progressed and changed or whether it has stayed the same, or what elements might have continued to remain the same over time. And so this strategy asks students to use Adobe Acrobat to use a specific literacy strategy called Opvl. And if you've ever taught or you're familiar with the International Baccalaureate, the IB program, this is a common analysis framework for looking at a document, which as an addition, a lot of times as teachers, we remember that we know how to read a document, we know how to annotate, but we might not think about how are we explicitly breaking that down for students. So this provides one lens for going into this document as a way to think about how we are actively annotating this document. But what I think is really cool about this lesson is that it asks you to think about this tool to amplify the experience of annotation. Because if we're using this tool just to annotate, like you would a regular document by yourself, there's really not that much of a difference in asking students to annotate on the computer versus asking them to annotate on a physical document. What I think is so cool about this lesson is that it gives students the opportunity to engage in something called a double entry journal. And what that means is that I, as a reader, I'm going to go in and pull out pieces. This is one from the Declaration of Sentiments to show what I think for each part of this analysis that I'm doing, what my interpretation of this document is. And then my partner goes in and responds to what I've said about the document. Do they agree? Do they think that this is interesting? Do they want to know more? So this is both teaching a student how to analyze a document, but also to reflect and respond in a way that engages inappropriate academic conversations. So teaching kids, you can disagree, but how do you do it in a way that fosters continued conversation? How do you support someone and say, well, I disagree, but I'm interested in this point. Can you elaborate a little bit more? and some of the things that we might naturally do as teachers. It combines all of these things together in this space. Yeah, so that is my first one with Adobe Acrobat.
I love that, and for those of you who are looking to access that particular lesson, if you see I have the scrolling bar underneath, you could definitely check that out there. I know you have another one. I'll let you get that ready, and then I'll share your screen again.
Yes.
This one's so exciting. I geek out with Kristen when she creates these learning experiences for kids. This one is really cool, and I think is a really great way for kids to learn more about like current events and things that are also happening. So do you want to share that?
Yeah, sure. So the first lesson I showed you was to show you kind of how the lessons are set up on edX, so you can see how to navigate through that. But for this, I'm going to just show you some of the examples of what I did with the students. So for this lesson
do you want to share? Because I see it, but do you want to share the screen that has the?
Yeah. So Tanya's going to drop the link for the lesson, and here what I asked students to do in Adobe Spark page was I've taught economics before, and so a really common project in economics is to do the stock market portfolio project, where students have a fictional amount of money that they're investing in a portfolio over time. And this is really cool because you can do this not just for US markets, you can do it for a ton of global markets. You can even have kids consider how they're investing in Bitcoin and many different currencies. I try to streamline it as much as I can for my particular students, but the opportunities with this are really endless. So I wanted to take a different thought about this project and ask kids to consider the Sustainable Development Goals and social impact investing specifically. So students in this portfolio were asked to pretend that someone was approaching them as an investment firm, that they wanted to invest $100,000 in social impact investing, but they wanted to learn about it, and that my students had to pitch to them a potential portfolio to win them as a client. So my students had to create, here's a sample of a logo that they had to create. They had to think about visual aesthetics and colors that they wanted to include in their website. And then as they went through their pitch, they thought about how they would also link some of their portfolio specifically to the Sustainable Development Goals. So students chose different funds that they wanted to invest in. They paired it up with what they thought Sustainable Development Goal matched with it. They explained why they chose that. They took screenshots of different points in the market to show trends with that particular fund. And they curated all of this in an Adobe Spark page. And then at the very bottom of this, students even had an opportunity. We played around and had students add a portfolio that they created in Google Sheets using the Google Finance function. And Google Finance is actually really cool in that it updates this information every 10 minutes in real time.
Wow, that's so cool.
Yeah, so students actually went in and coded it so that if the fund was up, it turned green, and if it was down, it turned red. So this is an older one. I'm not sure if this is still totally accurate. Otherwise, this person is doing very well. But it was something that was really cool too, because kids got really excited to go back and see how their fund did at the end of the year. And this was actually something that we did pre-COVID, and then watching their funds react to everything that was happening. I was getting emails of so much excitement for students watching this as the funds were changing all the time.
That's so cool. And that's such a great way for them to really experience like authentically, what is possible. Like, I love that. And I love your integration of so many different tools through this process and how you are showing the research, and that they have to create it as a pitch. This is such a great activity. And as you can see, if you see below the scrolling link, that'll take you to the lesson on the education exchange. So these are great examples of projects that are super doable with all the resources that you might need.
Oh, sorry. I have one more too. I feel sometimes when I show these things, they're overwhelming. Like, oh my gosh, that took so much time. I don't have so much time. So I just wanted to show you also one way to scaffold that even more. If you're interested in looking at the SDGs, was that I pulled up, this is just from one lesson plan, where students looked at different sustainable development goals. They paired up, choosing one that spoke most to them, and they created posts based off of the specific SDG that they chose. And that was something that we used to lead up to then creating this portfolio. And this was something that we did in a class. And students, some of them, I mentioned to you earlier, the ask was that what they create posts, but some of them, for lack of following all the directions, even created web pages here and videos. And they took this
to the next level. Yeah. So cool. I love this.
Yeah, within one class period. So
and for those of you who are not familiar with this, she's using Kristen is using something called a Padlet. If you don't have access to Padlet, you can also share on Wakelet. You could use a Google slide and have students make it a collaborative slide deck, and then have each student share on a different slide. If you use OneNote, a classroom OneNote, Spark Post actually embeds into OneNote, so they would just share the link and it will show, and you can use it as a Padlet. So you can use different tools to showcase your students' learning and make their thinking visible, having them share it and be able to see it. But I love how you have done that, and it's great because you could even have students comment on each other's, which makes it even takes learning even to the next level. So this is such good stuff. I love having you on. I always geek out with Kristen when she comes on because her stuff is so good and so rich in pedagogy and really powerful learning, and she's such a great teacher. Her students love her. I'm gonna make you blush, but it's so true. So I want to make sure that we leave you guys who are watching with a reflection question. Being good pedagogues, we also want to be, model it as well. And reflective practice is so important to our learning process. So we would love to hear from you. Feel free, to share your thoughts in the chat. But what are your favorite resources or tools for your social studies classroom? Maybe there's something that we can learn from you. Maybe there's a resource that you use that others can benefit from. So please share that with us. Also, feel free to share some ideas using hashtag Adobe EDU Creative, which is our shared space on the interwebs, aka Twitter. So I would love to hear from you, and make sure to follow Kristen on social media. Kristen, what's your Twitter handle?
Oh, it's at Chris Magaletti.
At Chris Magaletti, so CRIS Magaletti. So definitely follow Kristen. She is amazing. She shares great stuff. It's super thoughtful. Sometimes I want to be more thoughtful in my sharing, like Kristen. And definitely join us again. We will be back again next week. Next week is a really cool show. We have Microsoft coming on. So we will be interviewing. I can't remember it. It's beyond me, but we will be interviewing someone from Microsoft and MIEE/Adobe Education leader who is doing some crazy cool stuff through Teams and Microsoft. So definitely check it out. You don't want to miss it. It'll be really interesting to hear from Microsoft as well. And be sure to share this episode if you like it. Share it on your stream. Retweet it. Send the link to your colleagues, because sharing is caring, and we want to make sure that people are able to see the amazing work that is happening all over the world. So, Kristen, I'm sure that you have grading to do and things to get back to. We are so appreciative of your help, of you taking the time from your busy schedule to do this with us today, and for your constant contributions to education. You're a gem. I love you beyond, beyond, beyond. Thank you so much for coming today, and thank you to all of you, every single one of you who are watching today, for taking some time for yourself, to learn about something that you are passionate about, and for being the amazing educator that you are. We see you, we love you, we appreciate you. Thank you for the work that you do every single day. All right, until next week. Bye, everybody.